The only thing that we're interested in is putting money in your wallet. If you want to bet the fights, if you want to have a little bit of action, you are in the right place. With my partner, Ian Parker, I am Brett Okamoto.
We're ready to rock between our parlays, our props, our straight picks. It's time to make money. Let's go.
All right, after a week off for the Thanksgiving holiday, the UFC is back, and it is back this time in Orlando, Florida, from the Amway Center, where we will see a main event between the formerly retired Kevin Holland. I think he was retired for about 48 hours. He will take on Stephen Wonderboy Thompson in that welterweight main event. Hello, everybody. I am Brett Okamoto. That is Ian Parker, and usually we're here with you every single weekend. We took a weekend off, enjoyed the holidays. Ian, how was your Thanksgiving here in Florida?
Thanksgiving was good. You know, ate a lot, but I was really missing out on my UFC, so I'm glad we're back this week.
Yeah, Ian doesn't do well when there's no fights to bet on. I'm hoping none of you do well either. We were looking forward to getting back to a full slate, and we got a full slate. A lot of fights here on this UFC Fight Night card. Again, it's in Orlando. I am in Orlando, actually, a few hours away from my buddy here in Ian Parker in his home state of Florida. We are going to get to this main card, UFC Fight Night. You can watch it on ESPN and ESPN Plus this week. Main event, Stephen Thompson versus Kevin Holland, and that is 170 pounds. And that is where we will start off, Ian. It's an interesting main event because Stephen Thompson is on a 2-fight losing streak, has not fought in 2022, taking on Kevin Holland, who we just saw in sort of a weird matchup against Khamzat Chimaev, who he was not prepared for whatsoever. And then he retires again for about 2 days and then gets the fight that he really did want against Stephen Thompson. And he comes in as a favorite, a minus 170 favorite. You can see right there headlining the main card on ESPN and ESPN Plus. Kevin Holland minus 170, Stephen Thompson plus 145. We will also get to all of those other fights on this 6-fight main card. But talk to me about this main event, Ian. How are you looking at breaking this down, and how are you looking at betting it?
You know what? Both guys for a while have been saying, please give me a striker. I don't want guys wrestling me anymore for 3 rounds, 5 rounds. And they're both getting their wish. You know, this is a real interesting fight. For Stephen Thompson, this is an absolute must-win for him, coming off 2 losses. But it's interesting because people are talking about his age, talking about, you know, is this really it for him? But he got out-wrestled and out-grappled by 2 of the top guys in the top 5. And you're talking about someone in Gilbert Burns, and where Thompson actually was winning in that round 3, and then Bilal Muhammad had absolutely dominated him for the entire fight, but he did not get finished. And Kevin Holland does not possess that same type of wrestling skills, that same type of grappling, that control. And we don't even know about cardio over 5 rounds with Kevin Holland. We have not seen that yet. For Stephen Thompson, if he fights a smart fight here, maybe he pulls off the upset. But then on the other side, you have Kevin Holland, who, yes, he just retired. He came back faster than anybody in the history of probably sports. Coming off that Khamzat Chimaev fight, this is going to be interesting to see where he's at because he's fighting someone who's a very smart striker. He doesn't engage, doesn't fall into the whole trap of talking. And it's going to be interesting to see if Holland is actually the one that imposes a wrestling game in this fight. I think we may see a couple of takedown attempts from Kevin Holland early on.
Okay, so you're talking about those takedown attempts, and it is interesting because I think the betting market has always been kind to Stephen Thompson because he is a tough stylistic matchup for anybody. You know, he's one of those guys where the old tried and true thing of like, it's hard to find a guy that's going to mimic this guy. It's hard to be comfortable with him right off the bat. Now, Kevin Holland does have 25 minutes to work. Does that impact how you're looking at potentially betting an over or an under on this one, knowing that in your opinion, we might see something that surprises a lot of people here? Because Kevin Holland, he has been out wrestled by some other guys, but maybe he turns to wrestling here against Stephen Thompson.
Well, he'll have the advantage in the submission game, but I don't know if that's going to matter because so did Gilbert Burns and so did Bilal, and no one was able to put, Stephen Thompson away. And Thompson's also a hard guy to keep down. Ask someone like Tyron Woodley who feels that way. But for Stephen Thompson, the last 9 out of 10 fights he's been in, win or lose, have been by decision. The only loss that wasn't that was the fight against Anthony Pettis where he was winning, and then Pettis hit that Superman punch off the cage. For Kevin Holland, it's been an up and down ride for him. This is a very interesting fight. He has not fought someone like Stephen Thompson from a striking perspective. Someone who knows how to fight from a distance, angles, who knows how to avoid getting hit, and really can dictate the pace. For Kevin Holland, he's going to have to close the distance. And he is going, I think if he wrestles, that'll be the difference maker here. So for me, I am looking at an over-under situation because I can't take Holland in this fight. Does he have the power to do it? Sure, but not no one outside of Anthony Pettis has knocked out Stephen Thompson. So I'm going to look in that direction, man. You know, look, we look at these odds here. We're seeing wins by finish, by decision. If you want to think it's going to go the distance, take a decision play. I like that. But for me, I saw a really nice line over 2.5 rounds. I think this fight goes into at least the 4th round.
Interesting. Okay, so we're going to be looking there at the over 2.5. And if you like Kevin Holland, maybe you do take him by decision. Because I got to say, minus 170 does seem a little high for Kevin Holland in a big spot here, a 5-round fight against Stephen Thompson. But if you like Ian and you think this fight's going to go the distance and you like Kevin Holland, maybe you take him as a decision because the odds significantly improved there, plus 350. It's not a bad idea. Okay, let's move to the co-main event. And we've had some interesting line movement here. RDA opens up as the favorite, was probably not surprising to anyone. But look at this. He opened at minus 350. Climbed up to minus 400 by November 20th, and now look at it here. As of December 2nd, minus 550 for Rafael dos Anjos, who we know is a elite fighter, but it's kind of a guy without a home right now, bouncing between lightweight. This is back up to welterweight for the first time in a couple of years, taking on Bryan Barberena, who's on a nice run here. He had that spine injury. Since coming back, he is 3-1. Including wins over Matt Brown and Robbie Lawler. What do you think of this line movement, and how were you trying to bet this fight, Ian?
I think the line movement makes a lot of sense based on what level of competition RDA has fought. You know, he looked fantastic against Renato Moicano, which to Money Moicano, I know it's his new name, so I'll reference that. Took that fight on very short notice, but RDA looked really good there. And RDA, you know, against Rafael Fiziev, that was a tough fight, but he's fighting top-level guys. He has been for a really long time. He's extremely well-rounded. He fights smart, really good IQ. Really, anywhere the fight goes, he can deal with it. He takes shots really well. You know, and he's fighting someone in Bryan Barberena where, let's call it what it is. The guy's a Tasmanian devil. He's extremely stubborn, resilient, great durability, and he packs power. But his last 2 fights, he's fighting guys in Matt Brown and Robbie Lawler who are up, you know, close to age 40 or above, I believe, or in their upper 30s, and at the opposite of the highlight of their career, kind of on the way back. And, you know, against Robbie Lawler, he was losing that fight at one point, you know, and he has to rely on knocking out RDA here. I just don't see that happening. I think Barberena's a talented guy, but I think RDA really can take this fight wherever he wants. He'll probably utilize that jab, stay away from the brawl, and put Barberena on his back for 3 rounds. So I think we should be looking at probably a decision here either way. Both guys, 4 of the last 5 have gone to a decision, but I'm going with RDA by decision here.
Yeah, that's an interesting point about putting him on his back, because RDA, even though he's a little undersized at welterweight, he has shown that when he fights at 170 pounds, he can still utilize that wrestling and get into some top positions and win those fights at 170. Okay, let's go to 125. This is one of my favorite fights on the card. You got Mateus Nicolau taking on Matt Schnell. Nicolau quietly, man, has done a lot of great work in the UFC. He's 8-1. He was only 22 when he came off The Ultimate Fighter, fighting this man, Matt Schnell, who stepped on the scale a little heavy, about 2.2 pounds over, 0.5 pounds over, comes back without the hair to make 126. I got to tell you right now, Ian, if it's between forfeiting 20% of my purse or cutting off this beautiful head of hair, I'm giving up the 20% every single time. But Matt Schnell, he decides to make the change. Looks good on him. I mean, he's got the head to pull it off. Does he have the skills to pull off the upset victory here against Mateus Nicolau?
Look, this is just not the show where either one of us will be shaving our heads to make weight anytime soon. I can't pull off that look. You got good hair. I got pretty decent hair. I'll take second place in that race any day. You know, and with Matt Schnell, I don't really think the hair weighs as much as that. I think he obviously cut weight and was desperate, but he didn't look good on the scale. And 6 of his last 7 fights, win or lose, that fight has not gone the distance. That last fight may have been comeback of the year. Another ref may have stopped that fight. You know, he was on skates for quite some time, but this is a guy, he calls himself Danger for a reason. Whether he puts himself in it or causes you danger, he's an exciting fighter. Not a great chin, but he's pretty well-rounded here. But he's fighting a really strong prospect in Nicolau, who is flying extremely under the radar. There's a reason why he's a 3-1 favorite here. But there is just no way this fight's going the distance. And if it does, I'd be so shocked regardless of who wins. I think Nicolau is just such a smart fighter. He has fought some really tough guys since being in the UFC, and he's not been there all that long. You know, he has shown the striking. He's shown the grappling. He's got good cardio. And I think if you land on Schnell's chin, even at half power, he will drop. I like Nicolau here. I do think he gets it done inside the distance. But look, at minus 125, for the fight to not go the distance, the reason why we're getting that line is because Nicolau's wins, for the most part, I think even all of them in the UFC, have been by decision. but Schnell does not let that happen one way or the other. So fight to not go the distance, only minus 125.
I like the analysis, man, and my radar is going up. This might be a best bet. If you're going to be shocked if this fight goes the distance and we're only getting at minus 125, maybe a best bet from Ian Parker a little bit later in the show. Let's go to the heavyweight division, man. Tai Tuivasa taking on Sergey Pavlovich. Obviously, a lot of people looking forward to this fight, and that is a big credit to both men, but a lot to Tai. You know, he has really turned into a fan favorite, and he is coming off of a round 3 TKO loss to Cyril Gane in September. He's pretty used to quick turnarounds. This one especially, man. He said he wanted to enjoy himself on Christmas, have a few beers when the UFC goes to Perth, Australia in February. So he's making this quick turnaround. Is that quick turnaround at all a little bit of a concern to you? And what do you think about these odds here as you look at Tai Tuivasa? Plus 180. A lot of fans are going to want to take this guy just because they love him, but is it worth taking him at plus 180 here?
You know what? I think there's just other plays that make a little bit more sense. You know, when people bet with emotion, unless you're up money, just don't do it. You know, Tai fought decently recent enough against Cyril Gane, and, you know, he got finished. He did take damage in that fight. The fight went into the 3rd round. You know, I mean, look, Tai Tuivasa is a fun fighter. He was on a really good streak, and he even dropped Cyril Gane, which no one has done yet in the UFC. So you know he carries the power. But the problem is that he just is more than willing to take shots and be tough and brawl because, you know, that's just his style. Against someone in Sergey Pavlovich, we have seen that just doesn't work. This is not a good idea. This guy, I think, has cement built into his fists. He's got no emotion. You know, that last fight people thought may have been stopped early. He got on the microphone. He simply did not care. And quite frankly, Brett, I'm not going to argue with that even to his face. Plus, we had Sergey to win that fight. However, I think Tai took this fight because I think he thinks it's a 3-round fight. His cardio, his athleticism, he could win. Now, I think a lot of people are going to take Sergey to win this fight inside the distance, which based on record makes a ton of sense. I'm going to go the opposite way here, though. I kind of like at this plus 170 number, over 1.5 rounds. I'm hoping that Tai Tuivasa is able to stay away and get in and out because Pavlovich is not throwing a ton of volume here. You know, and maybe he also is going to be a little concerned of Tai Tuivasa's power, and maybe he'll just wait and pick his shot. So, you know, I don't mind the Pavlovich inside the distance if it happens maybe later on, but over 1.5 at plus 170, people might think I'm crazy for that one, but if you go look at when Tai has been winning his last couple fights, it's been a little bit later. Even when he lost past the 2nd round, I think he sticks it out for a little bit.
Yeah, I think that's a very, very good point, man. And you are zigging when others are zagging, but you get plus 170 there. And Tai, I think that this bet is going to come down to Tai. Is he going to go out there and just throw caution to the wind in favor of a fan-friendly fight? Or Tai, because he's the guy who jumps on the cage and drinks the beer, we don't think of him as necessarily this high fight IQ guy. He has slowed some fights down. He has shown a little bit of variety. He has shown some defense. So if he's able to do this, especially against a guy in Pavlovich who almost has never fought out of the first round. I think he's fought out of the first round one time in his career. So if you can test that a little bit, wouldn't it be smart to do so if you're Tai Tuivasa? Maybe not a bad idea there, especially at plus 170 to take the over 1.5 rounds. Okay, let's move to 185 pounds. You got Jack Hermansson, another guy in addition to Matt Schnell, who looked a little tough on the scale, but he gets it done. He gets on weight. You got to feel a little bit for Jack Hermansson, man. He was supposed to fight Darren Till in his last fight. Till gets injured. He has to fight Chris Curtis. Now he's supposed to fight Derek Brunson, a guy up there in the rankings with him. He falls out. He gets Roman Dolidze, who this is a legitimate short notice fight for Dolidze in terms of when it was booked. It was only booked last week. Dolidze coming in again off of that first round finish against Phil Hawes. We haven't talked about Roman Dolidze, I don't feel like, a ton in this show. What do you think of him just in general and as a plus 160 here as a short notice opponent?
In general, you know, Roman Dolidze's got a lot of talent here, and I think he's made a lot of adjustments. We've seen his last 2 fights, you know, beating Dawkins by finish and then beating Phil Hawes by finish, you know, but styles make fights. As cliche and as cringe as we want to keep saying this, it's like, you know, we're on repeat here. This stylistically is not a good fight for Roman Dolidze, but he's opportunistic. He sees something here. And I think it's you know, and if he loses, as long as he doesn't, you know, get starched or submitted and he goes to decision, his stock value doesn't really drop. You know, the guy doesn't have the best hands, but on the ground, he's an excellent grappler. He's physically very strong. He is smart. He knows where he's good. And in his last fight, you know, look, he didn't panic when Hawes took him down. He was able to lock in the leg lock, which we saw how gross that was and what that did. It changed the fight where he was willing to take over. But he's fighting someone in Jack Hermansson who's been at the top of this division for quite some time. He's fought the best of the best. And I just think that Jack is better everywhere. You know, these guys with the grappling, maybe it cancels out, which, okay, if it does, Jack Hermanson is the much better striker. And I want to say Jack Hermanson 2.0 against Chris Curtis. That jab looked excellent. As you see in the highlight right there, he was using it the whole fight. He stayed away from the power. And as long as he doesn't get caught by Roman, I don't see where Jack loses this fight. He's not getting taken down. He'll have the better cardio, better pace, better level competition. I love Jack Hermanson in this fight, especially because it's short notice. Roman, I don't know how much time he had to prepare for someone like Jack. So you're going to give me the Joker here. And at minus 190, I'm going to take that.
Yeah, it sounds like you're pretty confident in that one. And it's a good way of looking at it, right? Sometimes we're thinking about how guys can win. You flipped it on the side. How does Jack Hermanson lose this fight? Unless he gets caught, you don't see a whole lot of paths to victory for Roman Dolidze. So if you're only paying minus 190, that's under minus 200 for a favorite like that. That sounds like a good bet to me. Okay, we'll finish out the main card. It's Eric Anders versus Kyle Daukaus. Anders is his 14th fight in the UFC. Daukaus, I've been interested to talk to you about Kyle Daukaus, man, because he's been interesting in terms of someone that you're betting money on. He has come up short twice now as a favorite. That was against Phil Hawes and Roman Dolidze, two guys that we've already talked about today. He's been a little hit and miss so far, but the potential is pretty clear in this guy. What do you think of him? Because the betting market is still going with him. He's minus 220, but he has come up short in that favorite spot before.
Well, the betting market's telling you that for two reasons. One, just like you said, the potential's there. We've seen it, against Kevin Holland up until the headbutt. He looked really strong. He looked great. Against Pickett right there, he looked, again, finishing that fight. This guy's got submissions. His first fight in the UFC was against Brendan Allen, which is no slouch, obviously. But he's fighting someone, Eric Anders, who I'm seeing a lot of decline in Eric Anders. I don't see that same fire, that same, football powerhouse that we've used to, seen. His last fight, he lost a split decision that I believe most of the MMA world thought he won, us included. But he's slow. He's not throwing a lot of volume. He's relying on his power. His cardio isn't fantastic. And I think Daukaus is just better everywhere. And honestly, at minus 220, I know we talk about the baseline 200. I've been moving that line a little bit when I really like fights. I like Kyle Daukaus here. If he doesn't get caught by the left hand of Anders, he wins this fight. He can take Anders down. He can control him on the ground. He can fight from a distance here. I think Eric doesn't really throw combinations where they're so hidden. I think they're predictable. I think he throws them in ones and twos, and they come from a mile away. Kyle will be able to see that. So for me, I think Daukaus, this is his time to get a really solid win, but he's got to build off that. He can't keep going one-on-one and think he's going to enter the top 15 anytime soon.
No, I like having that threshold of, I don't really like to go above minus 200 if we're going to do it on a single bet, but in the times where we are supremely confident of it, we can edge that up just a little bit and go up to minus 220. Okay, that wraps up the main card. We're going to go through the prelim picks as always, but I want to give you an opportunity to talk about your favorite prelim on Saturday, and it is a 145-pound fight between Darren Elkins and Jonathan Pierce. Why is this the one that stuck out to you, Ian?
Well, you know what? When you got a guy like Darren Elkins fighting, you're going to have some sort of bloodbath. There's going to be a lot of back and forth, a lot of fun. And Jonathan Pierce, I really believe in this guy as a prospect. He's got all the tools. He's a fun fighter. He's nonstop action. And he's got someone in Elkins who, granted, he was put away in his last fight, who will keep coming forward, who has cardio, has good wrestling. His striking has gotten a little bit better. And for Pierce, he wants a veteran name on his resume. He's got to get this fight to look, I think he'll be the better striker here. But if he tries to outpace Darren Elkins and this gets in the third round, it can get a little sweaty. I do think Jonathan Pierce gets this done inside the distance. I think the damage that Elkins has taken over the fights is starting to take a toll. So I think Pierce gets this done inside the distance, or the fight at minus 180 just doesn't go the distance either way. But I think this is going to be a shining moment for JSP, and we're going to take him there.
Yeah, man. At some point, Darren Elkins has been known as that guy who can take a beating and then withstand it and come back. But at some point, I think that page has to turn, and maybe it turns here with Jonathan Pierce. He gets it done within the distance. All right, let's take a look at the rest of the prelims. We lost a good one on Friday between Amanda Hebus and Tracy Cortez. Unfortunately, Tracy Cortez was ruled ineligible due to some medical concerns after she made weight, but still a pretty solid lineup of fights here on the prelims. Ian, go ahead and do your thing on them.
Appreciate that. Yeah, unfortunately, Cortez Hebus is off. I'm just going to go on the record and say I didn't like Hebus there. Phil Rowe, Nico Price. You know, Phil Rowe missed weight by 2 pounds. What does that tell me? He didn't try to even cut those, so he didn't put any stress on his body. I think Rowe is the better striker. Both guys first round slow starters. I like Phil Rowe in that fight at plus money. Angela Hill versus Emily Ducote. This is going to be a real interesting fight. I'm going to lean Emily here. I think she's extremely well-rounded, but if Angela can get started early, she can make this a close fight. Scott Holtzman, Clay Guida. Give me the Carpenter, Clay Guida at plus 145. That cardio, that wrestling. His striking has also improved. You know, Brett, a lot of people complain we take chalk back-to-back dogs here. I'm going Michael Johnson over Mark here. I think that, yes, if this turns into a kickboxing fight, Johnson may be a little bit of trouble, but he is not getting out-wrestled in this fight. He's got good hands. And at plus 260, that's just a number that I can't let go in this fight. Elkins Pierce, to talk about that fight to not go the distance. Give me Natan Levy over Valdez. Rojo versus Francis Marshall. Marshall is an unfamiliar name, very talented. Rojo's tough, but against a guy like Marshall who's just going to be faster and I think better everywhere, Marshall's the way to go. Last but not least, at minus 330, Yasmin over Estela Nunez. Nunez is not the best cardio. This number is really high for a straight play. Spoiler alert, Yasmin will be a leg in our parlay.
All right, well, you mentioned the parlay. Let's just go ahead and jump right into it. Yasmin is on the parlay. What else we got on the Parker parlay this week?
You like that, right? I just hooked it right into it. So, as we talked about 5 seconds ago, if you missed it, you're tuning in now. We're going to go Yasmin, moneyline minus 330. Jonathan Pierce just to get it done. Nicolau over Chanel and RDA Javier dos Anjos. This is not the prettiest parlay at plus 133, but I may even call this the safe one. A lot of big favorites roping together, try to minimize the risk and get plus money, and that's how we're going to do the parlay this week.
Hey, they're all pretty as long as they win, man. That is the only thing that matters. Let's move on to the best bets. I went there out on the line and said I guessed what one of them was going to be. Let's see if I can keep that perfect record intact.
Perfect. I would say your perfect record is definitely going to be intact here. You know, you got to stop guessing this or else you're going to leave me with nothing to really talk about, dude. So, best bets, here we go. Jack Hermanson, minus 120. I really love him here over Roman Dolidze. I just think he's better everywhere. And if the fight stays on the feet with Roman taking this on short notice, I just don't see him being able to wrap up a leg lock. Give me Hermanson. Kyle Dawkins at that 200-plus number. We are going to go there over Eric Anders. I'm going to go main event over 2.5 between Thompson and Kevin Holland. I think Thompson's distance striking will be able to take us that far. And we're going to go with Rowe here at plus 120 over Nico Price. I think Nico has taken a lot of damage in his last few fights. I think Rowe is an extremely dangerous striker. If he can stay off his back, I'm going to take the underdog there.
Wow, so even though a weight miss, he is still on one of Ian Parker's best bets this week. Okay, now we're going to get to the long shot play of the week. And Ian, can you just tell us how to turn $100 into $4,000? That's all we need to know, man. That's all we're asking of you this week.
Well, this one's a little bit less. You know what, there's a bunch of close lines and underdogs I think are live here. Let's start off Michael Johnson at plus 260. I don't think he should be this big of an underdog. You know, his opponent in his last few fights has been winning via wrestling. Johnson's the better wrestler. His opponent might be the better kickboxer, but Johnson does have good hands. So at plus 260, Michael Johnson. Clay Guida against Holtzman. Guida, I think, matches up really well. I think the wrestling and the cardio is going to be the difference there. Emily Ducote versus Angela Hill. This is a pretty close fight. I do like Emily here in her last fight. She showed a lot of poise, a lot of fight IQ there. I think she may be slightly better, so we're going to rope her in. We're throwing Phil Rowe in this one as well. He did miss weight, but he didn't miss it in a way that I'm concerned because he didn't even try to cut it. And last but not least, Wonder Boy. I don't know who Kevin Holland has really beaten to really give me such a confidence in him to win this fight unless he can get this to the ground. So at plus 145, he's going to be in our long shot. At plus 8,457, let's go.
Wow. Five-teamer to cash nearly 9-1. And another thing about the Clay Guida Scott Holtzman fight, this is Scott Holtzman's retirement fight. And I feel like those don't always go so well for all of these guys. Winning the last fight is a tough thing to do in this sport. It seems like most of the time you're taking off the gloves after a loss. Unfortunately, that's just how this sport goes. Maybe Scott Holtzman can turn that around. All right, thank you guys so much for watching UFC Best Bets this week. We will be back next week. We only got 2 more left before the end of 2022. I think it's been a good year. Let's finish strong, baby, and it starts in Orlando. We'll see you next week.